We are playing 5-5-10 throughout this session, a little bit higher stakes than we normally play. A stronger reg opens in the low jack to 30. A older gentleman in the hijack calls, and I look down at ace of spades, jack of hearts. This is a hand that I generally want to be 3-betting here. It's not a hand that plays particularly well multi-way, being an offsuit combo. And then if I flat here, I expect the button, the blinds, and the straddle to often come in from behind. I also think that the good reg is going to be opening a little bit wider, and I think it's harder for the older gentleman to have a particularly strong hand when he just makes the call here. So I elect to 3-bet to 120. It folds around to the good reg, he makes the call, and the older gentleman folds. The pot is 290, and we go to a flop of king of hearts, 6 of spades, 4 of spades. It checks to me. I'm generally going to be betting this board at a relatively high frequency. I have a pretty large range advantage in this spot. These boards in particular, I'm going to be almost exclusively using small sizes. Generally, that's going to be the size I use on boards that are Broadway small card. My particular hand is going to be c-betting at a slightly higher frequency than some of my other combos with the nut backdoor flush draw, the backdoor straight draw, and the overcard. My ace should be alive the vast majority of the time because I do not expect my opponent to have ace king because they would be 4-betting. I elect to bet 90 into 290, and the good reg raises to 390. So my hand is generally going to be a mix here, probably leaning towards folding most of the time. I can continue with the nut backdoor flush draw at some frequency, but I do think that most players are not check raise bluffing with enough hands as they should be. And the hands that they are check raise bluffing are generally going to be hands that contain the ace of spades. So I think in practice, my hand is blocking a lot of the natural bluffs. I'm also going to be folding a little bit more frequently to larger sizes. Him using over a 4x in a 3-bet pot is definitely on the larger size. So it's a pretty clear fold to me. So I make that fold. In this hand, we have a player opening from middle position to 40. It gets flatted by the low jack, and it folds to the cutoff, who is the good reg from the first hand. He 3-bet squeezes to 160, and it folds to me in the straddle, and I look down at jack of spades, jack of hearts. I think this is going to be a pretty clear 4-bet. Not going to be flatting 3-bets for the most part with any of my range. And I think that he's definitely capable of 3-bet squeezing relatively wide here versus a open and a flat. I 3-bet to 400. It folds to him, and he tanks for a while and elects to shove in for 1600 effective. I think jack specifically is right on the cusp. I think I'm pretty much always going with queens. I think I'm starting to fold hands like 9s and then mixing things like 10s and jacks. I think this player definitely has all ace-king combos, some number of ace-queen combos, and I think it's possible that he has some pocket 10 combos. Obviously, his 5-bet shove versus a cold 4-bet is going to be relatively strong, but I thought that jacks was probably just strong enough to be calling here. I do make the call. The flop runs out 10-9 deuce, turn 5, river 7, and the good reg shows us pocket queens. We are once again battling against the stronger reg in this hand. He opens to 30 from middle position. The younger reg calls in the hijack, and I have a pretty clear 3-bet when I look down at ace of spades, king of hearts in the cutoff. I raise to 120, and it folds around to the stronger reg. He elects to 4-bet to 430. Definitely on the larger size. I think my standard here as a 4-bet in his position is going to be closer to 2.5 to 3x, but I think it's fine. Just makes the stack to pot a little bit awkward. The younger reg folds and it gets to me. Interesting spot. I think my hand can mix here either as a call or a shove. Again, his large sizing makes calling a little bit more difficult with my hand, making the SPR a little bit awkward. I think my hand can play as a shove slightly more against a stronger player like him because I think he does have some 4-bet bluffs, and I do think that he's going to be going slightly wider for value versus me compared to many other players. I would also prefer to have ace-king suited in the spot to make a call, as it plays slightly better post-flop as opposed to making sure I see all 5 cards. I do elect to shove all in for approximately 1500, get snap called by the stronger reg. The board runs out the 10 of spades, 9 of spades, 2 of hearts, jack of spades, 5 of spades. So we end up rivering the nut flush. He shows pocket aces, and we show the flush, and we scoop a $3,250 pot. Definitely got bailed out here. Not what we wanted to see him with, but we got lucky. In this hand, we open under the gun with king of hearts, 10 of hearts to 40. It gets called by a reg in the hijack. The younger reg in the straddle makes the call. We go to the flop with the pot at 130. The flop is the ace of hearts, 4 of hearts, queen of spades. The straddle checks and it gets to me. Relatively wet board. I'm going to be using slightly smaller sizes in general multi-way and out of position here. I do elect to go around 60% pot though and bet $75. The hijack makes the call and the straddle folds. I think that the hijack is going to have a high concentration of ace X here. They're going to have some queen X here. And then I think people are probably overcalling some of their pocket pairs with a heart. I don't expect him to have a 4 very frequently when he calls from this position pre-flop. He can also have some flush draws and some straight draws. The turn is the 2 of diamonds. I think I'm basically just going to be completely polarized on this turn card in most situations when I'm the pre-flop raiser. This 2 of diamonds doesn't help either of our ranges except for specifically ace 2 suited maybe. So I think I have a pretty clear overbet here. I bet 400 into 280 and I expect to get calls from hands like some of the stronger ace X at the very least. I think people are probably overcalling some of their medium ace X here. I think some hands will call like the queen of hearts with another heart, but I do think that this is a very difficult position for any medium ace X, any queen X, and all pocket pairs. He elects to make the fold and we scoop. In this hand, we have an older gentleman limping in middle position. The player to his left makes the call, and I elect to raise with the ace of spades, queen of hearts, and the hijack. It folds to the big blind who makes the call, and then a older regular in the straddle 3-bets to 260. I think this player is a little bit on the tighter side, definitely capable of 3-betting a little bit wide though, especially when it goes late position open and another person calling. It folds to me, and I think I have a couple options here. I don't think fold is necessarily horrible, but I think I generally want to be continuing here in late position versus the blind 3-bet. The only issue is that my hand doesn't play particularly well multi-way. I do want to be having some 4-bet bluffs in these spots, so I do elect to 4-bet to 635. The big blind folds, and the straddle player makes the call. We go to a flop 7 of diamonds, 6 of clubs, 7 of hearts. The pot is 1355. It checks to me. For the most part, in these 4-bet pot spots, I'm going to be using a 25% pot bet, and my bet is mostly going to stem versus flop range advantages. I think this one's relatively medium. I think I can bet 25% here. I think if there was a flush draw, or if one of the 7s was an 8 or a 5, where it starts to get a little bit more connected, then I would elect to be checking back the majority of the time. I think it's close though in this spot. I do bet 300 into 1355. I bet a little bit smaller even on this board, just because the stack to pot ratio I think is a little bit awkward in this situation. He makes the call. The turn is the 4 of diamonds, which is much better for my opponent's range. He checks, and I elect to check back here. I think again, the stack to pot is a little bit awkward. I think if he has a hand like pocket jacks, pocket 10s, pocket 9s, pocket 8s, he's pretty much just not folding at this point. A lot of his Broadway hands that I was ahead of would have been folding on the flop. So I don't think this is a very good turn card to continue, and I either want to reach showdown, beating some worse ace highs, or hope to hit one of my pairs on the river. The river is the 2 of spades. He checks, and I decide to check back. Again, I don't think that any of his pocket pairs are really folding here for this stack to pot ratio. He shows pocket 10s, and we lose this one. In this hand, we have a under the gun open by a reg 240. It folds to the stronger reg that we've been battling in the hijack. He makes the call, and it gets to me on the button. I look down at ace of hearts, king of clubs. Pretty clear 3-bet. I 3-bet to 160. It folds to the opener, and he makes the fold, and the stronger regular makes the call. I think when he makes this call, he's relatively capped. I think his range is going to be a lot of pocket pairs, some suited Broadways, possibly some suited ace-x, and hands like ace-queen. The flop is the 4 of diamonds, 6 of hearts, queen of spades. He checks to me. This is going to be a board that I'm betting at a high frequency. Similar to the ace-jack hand, I have a very high range advantage on this board. Again, I'm going to be using relatively small sizes on these Broadway low boards. My particular hand is going to be mixing at some degree. The ace-king can definitely make the best hand with an ace or a king here. And then having the ace of hearts and the king of clubs, I block a lot of his stronger queen X, which consists of ace-queen off and king-queen combos. I do bet 125, and he makes the call. When he makes the call here, I think he's going to have primarily pocket pairs, and he's going to have some queen X, so some of the ace queen off, king queen, which I block, and then he's going to have some queen jack, some queen 10 suited. I don't know if it goes any lower than that. He can also have a little bit of 7-6 suited, or ace-6, ace-4 suited possibly, but I think that's a very low concentration if he does have it. So I do not think that he would be flatting a under the gun open and then calling a cold 3-bet. The turn is the 6 of spades. So again, I do not think my opponent has too many 6s here, just because I think it's unlikely that he gets to the turn with those cards. I think a high concentration of his hands is going to be the pocket pairs and some queen X, with my particular hand having still okay equity with the overcards and blocking a lot of the queen X. I think I can definitely bet here. I think when I do bet, I'm going to be using relatively large sizes because the 6 of spades is a relatively blank turn. I bet 360, he tanks for a little bit, and he makes the fold. In this hand, it folds around to the cutoff. He limps, and I open up king of spades, jack of hearts to 50 on the button. It folds to the big blind and he 3-bets to 130. This player had been relatively new to the table, but he had a couple spots where he had a wide range and he had been relatively aggressive. I think versus this sizing, I have a pretty clear continue. I would have liked to see a bet of 4.5x from his C out of position in the blinds. He gets to the cutoff and he makes the call surprisingly. I think when the cutoff makes the call here, a large concentration of his range is going to be suited connectors, some ace-x suited, and pocket pairs. I think a lot of his stronger hands would have been raising in the cutoff. It gets to me on the button. A little bit awkward now. I don't think my hand plays particularly well multi-way. I'm also dominated at some frequency with my specific combo. I would much prefer to have King Jack suited here, but I think with the price I'm getting, it's still a mandatory call. So I call 80. We go to the flop with a pot of 405. The flop is the Jack of Diamonds, 7 of Diamonds, 6 of Spades. The big blind checks. I would expect the big blind to be betting a high frequency of his overpairs, his hands like Ace Jack, King Jack. I think if he has pocket 7s, pocket 6s, he would be betting here as well at a high frequency. I would also expect a lot of his straight draws, so if he has 10-9 or 9-8 to be betting here, and then a lot of his diamond flush draws to be betting as well. So I think a large portion of his range here is going to be hands like Ace King, Ace Queen, pocket 10s, pocket 9s, pocket 8s. The cutoff checks as well. I think if the cutoff had a hand like pocket 7s or pocket 6s, he would be betting here the vast majority of the time. So I think when it gets around to me on the button, I have a pretty clear value bet. I'm going to be using small sizes here for the most part on this board in a 3-bet pot, especially because we are multi-way. I bet 140. The big blind makes the raise to 425. I was a little bit surprised to see this. I think in general, this is pretty strong in a 3-bet pot, especially multi-way. I think this is going to be a high frequency of overpairs and sets. There's definitely going to be some draws in here as well. I think it's mostly going to consist of diamond draws if there's a draw here. This particular player, I think, would at the very least be raising hands with overs and good backdoors. So something like a Ace King or an Ace Queen with a diamond. The cutoff folds, it gets back to me, and I think I have a pretty clear call here with top pair, good kicker, and not blocking any of the diamonds. I do make that call. The turn is the 2 of clubs. The pot is 1,255. Now the aggressive player checks. So I think when this player checks here, for the most part, he's not going to have a very strong hand. I would think that his overpairs and his sets are going to be continuing here at a very high frequency. Again, I think a lot of those hands would have c-bet flop as well. So I don't think my opponent is particularly strong here. I think it's mostly going to be weighted towards hands like Ace King, Ace Queen, hands with a backdoor. If he did raise with a Jack, he might check the turn. I think Ace Jack is pretty likely to continue, but some of his King Jack, Queen Jack might check. But I also don't know if he's 3-betting those hands, check raising the flop multi-way either. I elect to check when I think my opponent's mostly full of air and worse hands than me. The river is the 6 of hearts and the aggressive player checks again. Kind of a weird spot for me, I think. I think my hand is very, very often good here, but I also don't really know what I'm going to get value from. I think if my opponent has a Jack, there's going to be some frequency of Ace Jack, King Jack. They could definitely have some weaker Jack X, but I just don't know if those hands are 3-betting and check raising. And then I don't expect him to check raise hands like pocket 10s, pocket 9s, pocket 8s. The pot's pretty big. I elect to check back, possibly a little bit on the nitty side, but again, I just don't know how many hands I'm going to get value from. Those pocket pairs, if he ever did raise those, I don't think are going to be calling either. So he shows Ace King and we scoop the pot. Wild ride of a session. We had some massive pots early on, multiple 4/5 bet pots for all in. Lost the Jack versus the Queens, and then we got really lucky with the Ace King versus the pocket aces to get us back to about even quickly. And then from there, we were relatively steady. Ended up squeaking a small win out this session of $275.